surpasses 170 million. It's the service of short videos, TikTok. And here, together with the desire to deal with a competitor, there is another anti-Chinese policy, which is nothing but mass hysteria that is being led in the States. And allow me to shed a light on history. In April 2024, the U.S. introduced a law according to which the country, for safety reasons, and apparently the U.S. is trying to explain everything by this phrase, they should prohibit the work of a popular network, TikTok, if the Chinese company does not send this platform to the American company. And the deadline was set for January 19th. And by then, the situation hadn't changed. TikTok was blocked, but only for 24 hours, because Donald Trump, immediately after taking office, the next day, has postponed this decision for 90 days. And now the president who restored the work of this platform is trying to pose himself as the savior, as the someone who campaigns for the freedom of speech, who's trying to defend the interests of its users. But of course, there is always a different explanation, a condition where TikTok is allowed to stay in the American market if they give at least 50% of their shares to the investors from the U.S. I am at a loss for words at how best to describe this situation. Either to bring up the investment climate or just to say this is horrible. No matter what public rhetoric Washington tries to follow, they try to take the course in order to restore the monopoly in the digital informational space. And in order to do that, they're trying to take all the leading world online platforms under their control, which is why their measures, their style could differ, but they share the same goal: to keep the reins of control on the public opinion. And how all of this correlates with the amendment of freedom of speech in the U.S. Constitution, which guarantees. I have no idea. But as for the good news, in Bahrain on the 27th January, there was the ceremony of the opening of the International Cultural Humanitarian Project, Russian Seasons, Symphony Orchestra of Marian Theater, led by Valery Georgiev, presented the program Golden Classics. And on the February the 1st, Russian Seasons opened in Oman. On the platform of the National Museums, they've organized the exhibition Gifts of Hiva and Bukhara to the Russian Imperial House. There was the performance of the small ensemble of the quartet of Berlinsky, and in National Museum of Oman, they showcased the documentary movie of the TV channel RT Arabic called The Dagger. On the Russian side, the ceremony was attended by the Minister of Culture of Russian Federation, Olga Lyubimova. From the Bahraini side, the leader of the Department for the Matters of Culture, Halif Ben Ahmed Al Khalifa. From the Armenian part, Sultan Qaboos Mun bin Fakht Al Said, and the General Secretary of the National Museum, Jamal Al Musavi. The events were attended by representatives of wide cultural and political circles, representatives of the circles of culture and art, who pointed out the master of art of Russian musicians and the exclusive side of the items on display. And the Russian Seasons exhibition in the year of 35 years of diplomatic relations with Bahrain and 40 years of diplomatic relations with Oman is especially important in the development of bilateral cultural humanitarian cooperation, as well as the popularization of Russian culture in the region of the Middle East. From January 26th to February 2nd, a regatta was held in Karachi, and we're grateful to our Pakistani colleagues. And this year, the Russian team took part in rowing and the rowing indoor, and 8 of our guys showed themselves perfectly. They earned gold medals in all the nominations, and we congratulate our athletes on such a brilliant performance in the international regatta. We would like to recall that in summer 2024, the Pakistani team visited Russia in the Grand Moscow Regatta, and the female quartet who debuted came second. And we're sure that this practice of participating in sport events is not just a useful experience, but will contribute to bringing our countries and people closer. Another important anniversary that we, of course, have been preparing for, even though it's not exactly our direct leadership, but the Russian University of the Friendship of Peoples of Patrice Lumumba celebrates 65 years, but it is especially important and it correlates with our work. So the Russian University of the Friendship of People is a long-standing, reliable partner of the Russian MFA when it comes to expanding scientific and educational cooperation with other countries, promoting our technologies and Russian language, as well as forming an objective image of Russia abroad. During the years of existence of the university, we've prepared over 200,000 highly qualified foreign specialists. Currently, they're housed to over 11,000 students from all the regions of the world. Fundamental knowledge and skills acquired in that university allowed foreign graduates of the university to successfully show their skills and talents in different professions and to solve any issues that their countries are facing when it comes to industry and economy. And aside from that, they prepare highly skilled specialists who are very in demand in our ministry, who work both in Moscow and abroad. And the university is a leader among Russian universities when it comes to building systematic, uninterrupted work with graduates. On the base of the university, for many decades, there's an international coordinating council of graduates of the educational establishments, which is trying to help the work of 70 foreign associates, and the Russian MFA welcomes and will continue to support the program that was launched in 2023 by the Consortium of Russian Universities, Ambassadors of Russian Education and Science, the goal of which is to promote in the world of our education and science the use of instruments of local diplomacy, as well as all the chances of the leading international specialized and mutually beneficial platforms. And I even defended my dissertation at that university. Today, in the GLAF UPDK, there will be a special event for the Moscow Diplomatic Club dedicated to the Diplomats' Day, timed to the 80 years in the Great Patriotic War, and this is organized by the Council of Young Diplomats of the Russian MFA, and this is being held for the young employees of the Moscow Diplomatic Corps. It will be attended by around 100 diplomats from 43 countries of the world, representatives of the leadership of the ministry, the diplomatic academy, scientific and expert circles. There will be the concert of different ensembles, the presentation of the year of the work of the council over 10 years, and new events planned for 2025. All this will be presented today. And of course, there will be an exhibition dedicated to the Great Patriotic War, as well as the exhibition Diplomacy for the Sake of Peace, which was prepared by the Rostov Regional Patriotic Society. The roads of glory, our history, and we regularly support them in their actions. On February the 7th, Grenada celebrates their Independence Day, 51 years. On this day in 1974, the country has broken free from the colonial shackles, gaining sovereignty from the Great Britain. And for the half a century history, this small Caribbean state has led a difficult path of development, went through dramatic events, including the intervention of American troops in October 1983, and we appreciate our relations with Grenada that are based on mutual respect, trust, and taking into account each other's interests. We're open to further development of cooperation in both bilateral format and on international platforms. We wish them all the best. We wish them peace, well-being, and flourishment. And February the 8th, I believe it's something that all of us should celebrate. It's a special day. It's the day of Russian science. This day is timed to the establishment of the Science Academy, which was established on the order of the Emperor Peter I on the decree from February the 8th or January 28th by the former calendar of 1724. Ahead of this day, I would like to recall that science, despite the efforts of several states and regimes to create obstacles, cannot be limited to some borders. You know, as Chekhov said, the multiplication table cannot belong to someone. Russian MFA always helps the Russian scientific circle whenever we're asked to do it, when it's necessary. We welcome the creation of new as well as the expansion of existing formats of international scientific cooperation. 2024 was rich on large scientific international events that took place in the territory of our country. And here I'd like to point out the Kant Congress, the first Eurasian Congress of Linguists, the 22nd Mendeleev Congress on General and Applied Chemistry, which was timed to 190 years since the birth of great Russian chemist Dmitry Mendeleev and the symposium Creating Future. And in 2024, it's especially important. Within the WIZEF Prize, we've opened the new nomination, Discovery. And here, the prize was given to the leading scientist, neurobiologist, the director of Shanghai International Center for Brain Research, Nikos Logotis. And here, international festivals, Science Zero Plus, are gaining popularity. There are large international platforms on popularizing scientific knowledge among youth and children, led by Russian initiators, and we hope to expand their geography in the upcoming year. We also have planned a range of international events in the current year to celebrate the anniversary of the leading universities, 270 years of the Moscow State University and 65 years of the Russian University of the Friendship of People. And even going a little ahead, we would like to congratulate the Russian scientific community with their professional holiday, because science is as limitless, and there is no limit to how grateful we have to be. And we have to remember it not just once a year. We should treat it with respect, with extra warmth towards our scientists who take care of our health, who help us in any and all areas of our life, who make new discoveries, and who largely preserve what we're calling civilization and humanity. So it's never too late or too early to address our scientists, who are, of course, world-class scientists. Thank you very much. We will continue to provide support to the action of the scientific circle to build the basis of fair cooperation of scientific circles for the development of humanity as a whole.
One more important announcement. I have for you. It is very interesting within the Diplomat Day. On December 10th, in a couple of days, on the Diplomat Day, we plan to update the official app of the Foreign Ministry of Russia. It's been operating since 2022 in Russian and English. You don't have to upload anything. Once again, all the users will receive a notification about necessity to update the app in due form. The app is available in App Store, Google Play, and Nash Store. During the update, our technical services made the app more stable, fixed bugs. We updated the app because of the requirements of the platforms where they are available, including in terms of information security. You can upload it now or later through the app. You will be able to keep updated about the latest news of the ministry, to see live broadcasts and receive contact information. And the interface of the app is almost the same as our official website. The navigation is convenient and easy. The link is placed on the main page of our website. The links will also be available in the text version of the briefing. I would like to also to say that we'll make a special message in our official accounts. Is the international affairs with us? Yes, please. Thank you very much, and congratulations to you as well. I think that you are also always a part of it. Here's the question. The U.S. President Donald Trump signed a decree to renew the maximum pressure on Iran. Within this effort to put this pressure, Trump's administration will have a campaign aimed at reducing the export of Iranian oil to zero. What do you have to say about it? I think that the announcements made by Washington are not surprising, neither for us nor for Iran, and they are not new. The U.S. administration resorted to similar, more or less pressure, as they say, the maximum pressure, during the previous terms of President Trump as well. They introduced restrictions against Iran, including in the humanitarian sphere. For example, during the pandemic, American restrictions made it more difficult for Iran to procure vaccines against COVID. You remember that? That led to many people dying. The same Americans blocked the procurement of drugs to treat child diseases. We talked about crazy policies that lie beyond the international law, especially when they concern vulnerable groups or situations to do with pandemics, epidemics, with man-made catastrophes, when more support is needed. By the way, we were not alone. The UN experts who visited Iran talked that such legitimate restrictions are very bad, that they influence ordinary people. Amid this, the threats of the U.S. administration doesn't sound extraordinary. They support the practice of political associations. Now they say that openly. In January, it's been 5 years since they killed the leader of the Corps of the Defenders of the Islamic Revolution, and he he was in his official capacity in a member state, and they didn't care about it. Our position is very clear. Unilateral coercive measures contradicting the international law and the resolutions of the UN, they are introduced against the mandate of the UN. This is enshrined in the Treaty on a Comprehensive Strategic Partnership signed on January 17, 2025 in Moscow. It enshrines the abhorrence of such measures, and they are called illegitimate and unfriendly. We continue to work in a similar way with our Iranian friends and consistently strengthening mutually beneficial cooperation for the sake of our both peoples. Pressure and sanctions won't prevent this. You know, some things boost bilateral contacts. Probably some things are long overdue, and then sanctions speeded up the situation. Thank you very much. One more question. On February the 1st, Transnistria does not receive gas, and this was as an excuse for statements of some officials in Moldova that Russia doesn't care about Transnistria. What do you think about it? We regularly comment on the situation. We publish information debunking such statements. I don't know who can believe such things, that Transnistria is left without gas because of Russia. At the same time, some people say that it's true, but it is not. Only people who do not understand the root causes of the current crisis can say that, or to intentionally distort the situation. This was the decision of the Kiev regime to stop the transit of Russian gas through the Ukrainian territory. One more reason is Chisinau refused to pay off the debt for this gas. Russia does care about Transnistria. 220 Russian people live there. Russian side proposed various ways to settle the situation, and all of them are blocked by the Moldavian side. I cannot say that we're talking about Moldavians, but I'm talking about the regime in Chisinau. They call it, I quote, getting rid of energy blackmail from Russia. What are they serious? It is clear that the so-called European gas originating from Russia is supplied to Transnistria through European mediators, but gas cannot be labeled because it's gas. Since recently supplies were renewed, this helped the situation to become less acute, because it's on the brink of becoming a catastrophe. But how long is this going to work? That's an open question. We support a long-lasting and sustainable settlement of the issue and is prepared to do all necessary to settle the situation. Thank you very much. Thanks. Is Ria Novosti with us? Good afternoon. We have two questions today. The first one. It's about the work of the Russian house in Baku. Azerbaijan said that the authorities of the country announced that the Russian house is to stop its activities there, and the Russian house received a relevant note. How does the MFA think about it. First, at the last briefing, we commented on absurd allegations against the Russian house in Baku. We underlined that we are waiting for these fakes to be debunked. In the media that published this information, Россотрудничество also commented on the situation. I tell one thing again and again: when such things happen, when we see some spy frenzy, I want to ask them only one question: do you want to talk about the activities of special services seriously, or do you want to use this topic for fakes? Those who started can talk about special services of other countries, and this topic was hyped, and this does not reflect the potential of our relations. So our stance is clear. Third, as to the information about Azerbaijan sending a notification, indeed, through diplomatic channels, we received it. I can confirm that. As a response, we said that we are prepared to finalize the registration of the Russian house in line with the law of the Azerbaijani Republic on the basis of bilateral agreement about the establishment and the conditions of work of cultural centers. This agreement dates back to 1997. It was signed on July the 3rd. We many times, and I'm sure that you can see it in various documents, we proposed to discuss this issue many times through diplomatic channels within consultations. These proposals were sent in the written form to the Azerbaijani side, so we hope that this issue will be settled positively. And all those media that hype the spy frenzy, please don't let yourselves be provoked. We're all adults. What are we talking about here? Do you have any more questions? Yes, I have one more question about France and Senegal. We learned that France withdrew its troops from Senegal. The soldiers will have to leave the country until September. What does Moscow think about it? And recently we see less presence of France on the African continent, especially militarily. As you said, so recently Paris started to withdraw its contingent from Senegal. You know, unlike the West, we do not give evaluations to contacts between third countries. If it doesn't directly impact us, we don't touch upon these issues. We cannot but note that the aspiration of a number of countries to receive true sovereignty and diversification of foreign political and economic partners is felt more and more seriously. It's natural. This tendency reflects the emergence of a multipolar world order that is going to be based on mutually respectful relations between states, and the realization of this new reality of ex-colonizers goes difficult not only to France but to other countries. They saw African continent not only as colonies, but as the zone of their own interests. All political scientists and experts say if formally the process of decolonization ended in the second half of the 20th century, in the first 10 years of the 21st century. But essentially, the treatment of ex-colonizers to their ex-colonies as a philosophy, as an ideology, and as a practice didn't go away. Big businesses giving loans unfair and not equal through soft power that is a kind of poisonous gas. Through force, they try to retain the model of controlling these colonies. They don't care about these countries, they care about natural resources there. And given cultural ties and long-standing economic cooperation, we can talk about full withdrawal from Senegal. Paris will aspire to retain their positions and influence there, but the question is what kind of agenda they can propose instead. This kind of dictatorship and superiority and dominance, exploitation of the African resources, disappearing history, and the practice to deploy military contingents disappears as well. These countries, they did not help to maintain security. Instead of accusing Russia and other foreign actors on the African continent, Paris should think about the reasons of the current situation and recognize that they are responsible for the situation. They should ask themselves why the African countries do not want to maintain relations on the current basis. If that is it, is Moscow Baku with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zajárova. Good afternoon. The question is as follows. Now, Prime Minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan, has a visit to the U.S. During one of the meetings with the government, he said that Armenia is at the intersection, and the best way to is to provide a list of their bilateral agenda. How can you comment on the current situation? We have commented on during previous briefings. As far as I understand, you are the publisher and agency, Moscow Baku, meaning Moscow Baku. You are turning 10 years, and you don't plan on changing your title and to change it to Moscow Yerevan. It isn't bad, but it wasn't in your plans. So please work within your agenda between on the relations between Azerbaijan and Yerevan. We have a lot to comment on in this agenda, but we have to deal with a lot of things. And thank you to a publication that from year to year you covered bilateral relations between our countries, Russia and Azerbaijan, and I wish you long years, inspiration, success. That's all I can say. Thank you very much, and for congratulations as well. Thanks to you. Do you have any more questions? Let's move on. Is the portal Ukraine.ru with us? Good afternoon. Madam Zahárova, thank you very much for the opportunity to ask you a question. I'm joining to congratulations of my colleagues with the upcoming Diplomat Day. You said that there were outrageous statements of Donald's administration's State Secretary Rubio. The concept America First is a concerning motto. This is quite similar to German's motto, Germany is first. But the peace through force can bury diplomacy. This doesn't reflect the commitment of the EU for the UN Charter. Does President Trump see some kind of prospects for the settlement of the Ukrainian crisis through negotiations with the UN? From our experience, I mean, statistics and experience, we are prepared to work with those who respect others and take respectful approach based on respect to bilateral relations and the understanding that words should be reflected in actions. We are prepared to the situations. We had a lot of difficult partners. There were a lot of difficult situations that we overcame. They became our experience and gave results. That's exactly how we treat this particular situation. As to the possible role of the US in the settlement of the Ukrainian crisis, yet again, it will depend on the certain actions and plans of the new administration and on how they act. For now, they say a lot of words, they make a lot of statements, but there are no certainty about their actions. So prospects for negotiations or any kind of steps in this regard would be preliminary. But our position is very clear. Every day, at all levels, unanimously, all the representatives from the president of our country to Minister of Foreign Affairs, government representatives and other speakers, all of them say about Russia's approach and view on the crisis and the root causes of the crisis, as well as on the settlement. There is no problem with this. As to Washington, they have to word out their policy, but we will see at their actions. But it's nothing new, and we say it every day.
Thank you very much. Thank you. News.ru, please. Hello, Ms. Zahárova. News.ru. Here, Pavel Vorobyov. We have two questions for you. The first question is about the new department of the Russian MFA. Sergei Lavrov has recently presented a new Department for Partnership with Africa. And while Russia expanding its ties with Africa, it diminishes its ties with the European countries. Is the ministry going to transfer diplomats working in Europe to Africa? I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Is the ministry going to gradually transfer diplomats working in Europe to Africa? Since you are our regular visitor and guest at our briefings and you have been listening to our comments and actions, and we have made comments with regard to the actions that are taken by our diplomatic service and actions that were taken by non-friendly states against our country. They have been closing consulate generals. They have been expelling diplomats. They have been making the work of Russian diplomats extremely dangerous on the territory of their countries. You probably remember that dozens and later hundreds of diplomats had to return to Russia, not because they were summoned by Russia, but because their work was blocked in those countries with the methods that I had listed earlier, methods that were taken against non-friendly countries, or should I say non-friendly regimes. And because of the policy of Russian containment and then inflicting a military defeat to Russia, waging an information war against our country, blocking transportation, trade, humanitarian exchanges and ties. As a result of these actions, we have made decisions in order to reorient the work of the Russian Foreign Ministry to another direction that would bring tangible results, where we could work extra hard because the international situation requires it. In terms of diplomacy in many other areas like economy, humanitarian exchanges, etc. Since 2022, it has been commented many times by Sergei Lavrov. He was speaking about it publicly, and there were meetings with diplomats, with those diplomats who had been expelled by non-friendly regimes. They had to leave those countries, and we have initiated the employment process. And you are talking about planning to transfer these diplomats. Well, actually, we started it not because of our desire to diminish our presence somewhere, but we have been started to do that due to the actions of certain countries and regimes against our diplomats. And in line with the updated foreign policy concept of our country, we have been transferring resources like human resources from the Western direction to the more relevant and necessary directions like Global East and Global South. But it started as an adequate evaluation and response to the situation fostered by the collective West. Our cooperation with Africa becomes more versatile and multifaceted, and it is demonstrated by the establishment of the new department for partnership with Africa. We have been setting up new embassies in Burkina Faso, Equatorial Guinea, and Sierra Leone, and soon the embassies in Niger and Sierra Leone will resume their activities. We'll plan to open an embassy now of our country in South Sudan, and we are going also to open an embassy in Gambia, Liberia, the Comoros, and Togo. And we are sending there not only diplomats who are specializing in studying Africa, but other diplomats who worked in other directions of the Russian foreign policy, like in European track, for example. It is true that our diplomats worked in other directions. There were cases when diplomats went to other countries or continued their work in the central headquarters of the Russian Foreign Ministry, or have remained committed to their work in European countries, but others have decided, for example, to change their qualifications since they know the language, they know the country specifics, and they would easily switch and would swiftly go to work to other continents and countries. Thank you, and we wish luck to our diplomats and working in new directions and tracks. And we have a question on Ukraine. The Ukrainian ambassador in the United States claimed that Kiev is ready to discuss the holding of elections until the end of 2025 if this issue will be initiated by the new U.S. administration. What's your position on that due to the current level of the sovereignty of the modern Ukraine, how these elections could be democratic if they depend on the will, mood and decisions of another state? In my opinion, the Ukrainian ambassador has ashamed and embarrassed her own country. Probably she is trying to send an SOS signal to everyone that she's going to say the words of truth for the first time over the past month, but actually she said what we have been speaking about for years. There is no democracy. There are no electoral processes. You know, when Zelensky and Poroshenko were running for elections, we have always stated that there are no democracy, and to ensure the peaceful coexistence of people in Ukraine, this process should be undertaken bearing in mind all the aspects. Elections are necessary to give the chance for the country, its people, to exist peacefully together, one by side, and to address all the outstanding matters. The Kiev regime has been refuting all that, and they stated that that Ukraine is the most democratic and free country. The West called Ukraine a young democracy that soon will become a leader in all aspects. And now the Ukrainian ambassador says that as soon as we have a green signal from Washington, we will be ready to start electoral procedures. It confirms what all our experts in our country and in other countries have been saying. Experts all over the world have been saying that the current Zelensky's status is totally legitimate. And again, it was confirmed by the remarks of the Ukrainian ambassador. The Ukrainian official has just confirmed that Ukraine has no sovereignty in any area. This country doesn't have a legitimate president, and she has just confirmed it. Ukraine depends on the will of its Western masters, and Ukraine cannot even take its own decisions in the issues of the issue that characterize any nation. Well, if we speak about elections, just look at the electoral processes in Venezuela, in Georgia. It doesn't matter what international organizations are speaking for the West. What's important for the West is what they saw before the elections took place. They have pay attention to all the small details that are not necessary. And we hear Ukraine saying that they are waiting for the signal from Washington. Again, it's a blatant admission of the fact that there is no legal founding of what's going on in the state of Ukraine and what remains of it. How is it even possible? And the West sees no problem with that. They're probably going to wait and see if elections could take place in that country or not. The West had so many problems with elections in other countries, like they had wrong candidates, the coverage in mass media is wrong, but nonetheless, the voting results have shown that those elections were totally legitimate. But here they are trying to link elections with the foreign structures who are going to dictate the will to the Ukrainians. Thank you for your commentary. China Media Group, please. Hello, Ms. Zahárova. Today and before that, you have quoted so many statements of Donald Trump, but there are so many of them that we have two questions. Less than 48 hours after Donald Trump signed a bill on tariffs on Canada and Mexico, U.S. President stated his decision to delay its implementation for 30 days that should be characterized as he has no clear plans for that, and at the same time Donald Trump didn't delay the rise in tariffs on goods from China. However, this increase was lower than expected. What's your position on that? I believe that all the experts have recognized that this is the tactic that, or strategy, or a style of the current Trump administration and its members. That's why I've been saying that we need to look for specific steps taken by them. Increasing tariffs is not something new in the Donald Trump's policy. The same ultimatums and actions were taken by President Trump in his first presidential term. And at that time, they used illegitimate restrictions, tariff restrictions that go against WTO standards. And by the way, all these measures inside WTO were made up by the United States themselves, and now they go against what they've been imposing to everyone else in the past. Since they are losing to China in terms of economic competition, and not only China, the United States is trying to rewrite its own rules and the rules that they have been writing for everyone else, and they are acting like other countries of the collective West. And since you started with this comparison and said that they have no clear plans for the future, I believe that we could allude to the Western movies. They are trying to rob the express train of the Chinese economy. I believe that such protectionist measures and restrictive measures go against the rules of international trade and the relevant international trading system that was set up with the participation of the US. They have a negative effect on international trade, lead to its fragmentation. And I believe that by threatening with tariffs, they are trying to put pressure on trade partners so that these partners would obey to the U.S. demands. I think that following the example of Mexico and Canada, who promised to take certain measures, including to tighten up migration control on the U.S. borders, we see that quite often trade partners of the United States, whose economies significantly depend on the American market, are ready to make some concessions in order to prevent escalation in trade. I've read a lot about it, and we have already heard the positions of China, and they are saying that in the trade war of two major economies there could not be any winner, and its negative consequences will have a global nature. And another statement made by Donald Trump during his press conference with the Prime Minister of Israel, he stated that U.S. will take control of the Gaza Strip, and they will own, we will own it, and we will be responsible for diffusing all the dangerous and detonated bombs and other weapons. He also added that the U.S. will wipe off the map all the damaged buildings and create conditions for the economic development. Well, as for the Gaza Strip situation, it's a tragedy that is unveiling there over the past decades, and this tragedy now has turned into a disaster. We proceed from the idea that today it is important to ensure the implementation of agreements, ceasefire agreement signed by Israel and Hamas, and the exchange of prisoners of war. And I hope that these agreements will be realized. The conflict has taken lives of tens of thousands of people, and I hope that this crisis will be addressed. It is important to provide humanitarian assistance to everyone in need. It is important to ensure a lasting ceasefire, and I believe that addressing this objective is going to be a main and central objective, and all international efforts should be aimed at that, including the efforts of all parties involved in the crisis, and to create proper conditions for the full-fledged settlement of the Palestinian issue. We believe that any speculations or statements of a populist nature and other measures of palliative nature are counterproductive and won't help to address the issue, and they just add more tensions in the regions and exacerbate the existing problems. Russia, in its part, as we have stated many times, is ready, together with other responsible members of the international community, to take the most active part in overcoming the effects of the conflict in Gaza and at large, to find ways to achieve a mutually acceptable, comprehensive, and lasting settlement of the Palestinian issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Reuters with us? Madam Zahárova, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Our question has to do with potential negotiations on settling the Ukrainian conflict. And in particular, Russian leadership, including the Minister of Foreign Affairs, repeatedly stated that within the potential negotiations on regulating the conflicts, it could only talk about stable, legally binding agreements that could eradicate the rooting causes of conflict, where could be established the mechanism of impossibility of their violation. What are those agreements? So which sides, other from Russia and Ukraine, should sign these agreements, and who should pose as a guarantor of these agreements? You know, if we formulate the answers to these questions, then I believe each of us should get at least 5 Nobel Prizes. Because yes, Of course, these are the questions on the international agenda, but let's try to look in detail on what could be possible in the format of our communication. Russia repeatedly stated its readiness for negotiations. And you see, this is a diplomatically political approach to settling crisis, including the Ukrainian one. We advocate for a truly final, fair, and stable settlement, which includes the eradication of the whole complex of its root causes. And this is exactly what the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, repeatedly states. So what are those root causes? Let us go through them once again. First of all, it's the violation of agreements not to expand NATO to the east, the aggressive consumption of the alliance of the whole geopolitical space up to our borders. And the second, it's blatantly, and here we use the Western terminology, racist, and it has been legally established, neo-Nazi, which is pretty much the same thing. The only difference is the matter of habit, or disclosure, but it's the segregation of people based on their nationality in order to humiliate them or even destroy them. So these racist, or as we say, neo-Nazi actions of the Kiev regime after the coup d'etat of 2014 to deliberately, consciously, targetedly planned destruction of anything Russian, the language, the mass media, culture, history, traditions, religion, and here I mean the canonical Orthodox Church, and of course then it came to the eradication of people and the temporary peace or the so-called freezing of the conflicts are unacceptable because they will continue to be used by the West, by the collective West, by its different representatives in order to reinforce their military potential of the Kiev regime and of course any efforts of an armed revenge. We need stable, legally binding agreements and mechanisms that would guarantee the unacceptance of any renewal of this crisis. And as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, pointed out on January 14th during his press conference on the results in the foreign policy of 2024, we need agreements that would fixate any conditions of ensuring safety of Russia and the legal interest of security of our neighbors, but in the context that would abide by international law, reinforcing the impossibility of violating these agreements. Is there a basis for this? Of course. It's all the workings that have been agreed upon in the spring of 2022 during different rounds of Russian-Ukrainian negotiations in Belarus and Turkey, which oversaw neutral, out-of-bloc and nuclear-free status of Ukraine, its demilitarization and denazification, as well as the prohibition of placing of foreign troops and bases on the Ukrainian territory, and all the positions that have been voiced by the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, when he addressed Minister of Foreign Affairs in the June of 2024. I'd like to recall that during the negotiations of 2022, he had plans that the guarantors of these agreement, and I'd like to draw your attention once again so that the mass media and your colleagues understand this perfectly. This was during the negotiations of 2022. It was planned that the guarantors of this agreement would be the permanent members of the UN Security Council, including Germany, Israel, Italy, Canada, Poland, and Turkey. And this list changed constantly. As for the perspective of future possible agreements and who exactly was posed as the guarantors of those peace, we will see of the after new peace negotiations if they are to take place. Right now, I can't give you any more details. It's difficult to oversee. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Is Bolt News with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zahárova. In Estonia, as you know, they're trying to pass over the Orthodox Church in Constantinople to tear it apart from Russia. And in Latvia, the elderly Russians are made to pass the Latvian test, threatening deportation. So they're trying to limit the right for religious beliefs, masking it under the issues of security. So could Russian Federation get the support from the UN in order to denounce Baltic authorities and their policy of limiting the rights of Russian Orthodox Church? You know, we've commented on this several times. The official town continues to raise the tension on the Estonian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchy in order to undermine its canonical unity with the Russian Orthodox Church, or maybe fully eradicate this structure, passing everything under the leadership of the Constantinople Patriarchy. So in the fight to preserve its existence, the Estonian Orthodox Church have had to change their name twice to rewrite their charter. And we see, and we're being told, we get the reports about it, many complaints of the Orthodox believers of violence and rampant lawlessness from local authorities on different levels. I would like to recall about the open letter of the leader of the Pukhtic Stavropigil female monastery of Filaret towards the State Council, which is the highest representative legal basis, and towards the ministers of this country who assess the upcoming amendments to the law of churches in the Estonian Republic as a threat to closing of the monastery. According to her, the goal of this project is to force the Estonian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchy to change its judicial basis and to go under the leadership of Constantinople. According to her, in 1990s, the monastery fully renounced any property without compromise and without any claims. They passed over anything to the state in order to keep the spiritual link with the heading church. Just one quote that reeks of unlawfulness and the lack of any beliefs here. You put the monastery outside the law, only proposing two options: either the change of legal base or forced liquidation, she said in her letter. We denounce such approaches and we call on the Estonian authorities to closely follow the rights of any religious groups. We're also appalled by the situation of forcing these women who for over 70 years, those who were in the Riga, the Troitsergiev monastery, and who are Russian citizens, they're being forced to take a test of the Latvian language according to the amendments adopted in 2023 about the law of immigration. I'm sorry, but when we read the books about Nazism, about the Third Reich, or watched the movies, it's something from their practices. It's their style. This is what is taking place in Estonia. It's horrible. It's inhuman. There is no common sense, and it's shameful practice, supposedly necessary as their fight against threats to security of those countries, in particular Latvia. It's not a fight against threats. Is this 70-year-old woman a threat to Latvia? These women who are 70 years and older, serving the church, the monastery, renouncing the regular life by gathering at the monastery. They're the ones who pose a threat to official Riga. It seems Riga's affairs are truly going bad. If now they believe that these women are a threat to them, and the threat is coming from the church, but what kind of safety are they talking about? It's not the physical safety of the state of Latvia. What kind of safety does Riga speak about? What exactly are they threatening? What could these women possibly threaten? If they truly threaten anything, it's just one thing: that their beliefs and their service, their dedication to true things and ideas, they are a threat to lies and to that which is called fake, but it's just a distortion of reality. That's what it is. They will preserve the truth. They made the choice, and they will bear that cross until they die. We regularly call the attention of the Secretary General of the UN, the Higher Commissioner of the UN on the human rights and the special procedures of the UN mechanisms of the OSCE on these policy of limiting the rights of Russian Orthodox Church, on following Russian citizens, and it's the blatant violation of the right to freedom of religious beliefs, overseen in the International Pact of Civil and Political Rights, as well as International Convention on Liquidating All Forms of Racial Discrimination. We will mention this again during the 58th session of the Human Rights Council, which will open its work in Geneva on the 24th of February. We would also like to point out that the detailed material full of facts on following Russian Orthodox churches is included in the thematic and country reports being prepared by those who work at the ministry. And you see the ambassador at large who works with the rights of religious beliefs. He now introduces the second report on the situation of violation of rights of religious beliefs in Ukraine. But apparently, these reports will be issued not only when it comes to Ukraine. We have enough to publish these articles in other countries as well, and these countries, you know them all too well, the countries of the collective West. And the situation in the Baltic countries is reflected in another report on the rights of our citizens abroad, and it was published on our website in December 2024. And proof of the violations of those rights on blatant neo-Nazism and racism. And we see this. All these reports can be found on the website of the Russian MFA. All these reports are published and included in our briefing. They're passed over to several structures. Do you remember how the USAID formed the task for mass media? Strategic silence. And this strategic silence is not only present, it has infected foreign structures. And they're under colossal influence, colossal pressure of different kind, of the same Anglo-Saxons. We will continue our work with the leaderships of international organizations. No matter what state they're in, no matter how much pressure they're facing, we will try to call their attention to active work, providing facts and information, trying to get any reaction so that it works as it should. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is the Iceland radio with us? Yes, good afternoon, Madam Zajárova. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, yes, please. Good afternoon. Can you hear us? I believe that the Iceland radio has disappeared. You were here. I can't even see you, but I can hear you, unfortunately. Yes. Yes, now I can hear you. I would like to congratulate you on the holiday, but, well, the holiday is only coming up. You've conveniently mentioned US aid. But is it too early to celebrate the fact that this organization was destroyed? Perhaps something else is coming as a replacement. What do you think about that? You think no one is happy? We have nothing to celebrate. To celebrate the fact that it was closed out. How much damage has been done? If they repented for their lawlessness, or if they've eradicated mistakes, if they could guarantee to the international community that this would not happen again, then we could be happy. But right now it's just a collective shock that the world experiences as a whole. Everyone who gets new details every day. The only thing, perhaps, that we could mention that we feel satisfied about is that everything that we've been talking about turned out to be true. You see, truth will always out. It doesn't matter if it takes a year, 2, or more. But mass media are working actively, and right now time is flying by, and we see that something that's been hidden for decades is coming to light. So we have no choice but to feel satisfied that everything we've been mentioning, using facts, was confirmed fully once the data about the action of this structure was revealed. So of course we feel some sort of satisfaction that we've stood strong against the criticism and threats when US aid was closed in our country, saying it's nothing but an agency on helping the development. It's a machine of interfering in internal affairs. It's doing nothing but contributing to the change of state affairs. But the last thing they're doing is actually aiding anyone. The rest has nothing to do with satisfaction or joy. It's actually quite sad and tragic that the leading international superpower is spending money on destructive actions that lead to catastrophes and tragedies all over the world. Colossal sums of money are spent on pseudo-scientific concepts that have to do with their extremist LGBT, transgender, non-binary, quadroberes. Large sums of money were pumped into shaking up the public opinion. So much money was spent on mass media who did nothing but destroy the freedom of speech, who turned these into an instrument of propaganda, which is actually prohibited in the US. And I'd like to recall that the kind of work at the agency in our country, we qualified as nothing but not worthy of the intended goal. As for the future of this agency, I believe that one way or another, it's going to be very difficult, not only to the United States, but to the countries of the collective West, to renounce the mentality of interfering in internal affairs. Because then they have to renounce as a whole the concept of their dominance, of their exclusiveness, of enslaving other countries, of using their resources, of this kind of relationship as a colonial power and their colonies. And US aid is nothing but a consequence of this ideology being used in practice. Okay.
I would like to talk about Asia. I recently came back from trips to Laos and Myanmar. I would like to learn more about Russia-Myanmar relations. What are perspectives of cooperation with the current military government there? What does Russian officials what's the official stance of the Russia towards this country? Our countries are tied by relations of friendship and cooperation for more than 75 years. We have similar approaches to many relevant issues in the international and regional agenda. We both share our vision about multiple world order based on cultural and civilizational diversity, sovereign right of every country to determine their path of development. As to the internal political situation in Myanmar, we support the principle of non-interference into the internal affairs. We are convinced that the situation can be settled through the efforts of people of Myanmar and international help. First of all, through ASEAN, can play on the supporting role. All sanctions and attempts to isolate this country with financing, military and technical support to the radical opposition are counterproductive and won't bring peace to the country. Thank you very much. Thanks to you. Is Lenta with us? Yes, good afternoon, Madam Zahárova. We have the following question. Recently, President of Poland said that Warsaw should be invited to the table of negotiations on Ukraine, and the presence of Poland would be in the interest of Ukraine. What does Moscow think about the possibility to invite other countries to the negotiating table? Is Warsaw's presence admissible? I partly answered your question when I talked to your colleague from the Chinese Media Corporation. You know what is interesting? You cite President of Poland, Duda. He said that Warsaw should be invited to the negotiating table about Ukraine. But is it the same Warsaw and the same Duda who talk that there's no place for negotiations, everything should be settled through force? Do I understand it correctly? Is it the same official Warsaw and the very same president of Poland who supplied arms to the Kiev regime and who worked to escalate the crisis? Do I understand it correctly? And now they are talking about negotiating table. They have to understand that the negotiating table means diplomacy and political methods and methodology, and not the methods that lead to the escalation of the situation. It is clear. I would like to note that since 2022, NATO representatives and the EU representatives have talked multiple times that no negotiations and no negotiating table can exist. Everything should be settled on the battlefield. If they changed their mind, probably they should articulate it better and to say that they have another concept, and they have to show this through their actions. They have to act for the sake of the peace process. What kind of peace process are we talking about? What kind of negotiations are we talking about if they supply arms and do all they can so that the Kiev regime continue hostilities till the last Ukrainian? There's a clear problem in the logic. The rest of the question was answered earlier. Thank you. Is the Moscow Post with us? Good afternoon. We have 3 questions today. First, the close circle of President Trump make a lot of statements, outrageous and sometimes even debunking, which ones attracted your most attention? What can you say about them? I wouldn't comment on them. I'm interested in facts that they provide. I'm not interested in the evaluation of the situation, and I'm interested only in facts. I would like to read and understand what happened in reality, where money went, what the strategy was, what kind of accountability there was. That's what I'm interested in facts, the true, real data. And people can draw conclusions for themselves. That's what attracts my most attention. We saw a lot of evaluations, but I would like to focus more on facts. When any of the representatives of the close circle of President Trump share facts, probably they share screenshots, links to documents themselves, or any other data, direct quotes. These are the most interesting things. I was shocked by the strategic silence as a concept that was proposed by the media for grants that they received. But I thought that they worked differently, not like that, and I was shocked by gender agenda that was reduced to transgender operas and money to physically change gender in. And I thought that they promoted and these ideas, but they limited themselves in their activities. But they did things that are shameful even to talk about, and I don't have such words because such things are not usually pronounced out loud. And the programs to change regimes and the money that was spent there, these are the most interesting topics for me. And thank you. The next question. Press Secretary of the EU on Foreign Affairs and Security Policy said that Russia every day terrorizes the population of Ukraine and targets civilians. Russia will be punished for this. 5 years ago, the first administration of the U.S. president degraded the status of the EU to the international organization. What can you say about that? But those are people, illiterate people, they cannot say anything but the things that they have in their guides. The terrorized population of Ukraine, what are they talking about? The EU representative on foreign affairs, Ellen Nooney, does he know that Zelensky recognized that they were planned assassinations and killings of civilians in our country? I mean civilians, not even military people. And these representatives, does he know that for decades the Meritorious website have existed for years, and other prohibited organizations and websites, they contain information about people that must be killed from the point of view of the Kiev regime? Do you know about the number of terror attacks that committed by Kiev? And they publicly take responsibility for them. They openly tell about how they kill Russian people. Do the European representatives see this? Do they even look at it? We regularly inform people about the terror attacks, but this representative, did he see these photos during the briefing that took place a week ago, how journalists listened to what I talked about in Terra. They were in tears. I heard experts who shared information, and these are people who deal with dead bodies, but they couldn't be calm while talking about what they found out in the city of Ruskaya Porечье. All the acts that Ukrainians commit, are they going to be commented on by the European representatives, or are they going to continue to forget about it? But we will continue to inform you about atrocities committed by Ukrainians. That's why we call these people Ukrainian clique. You had one more question, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, about the Trump administration. It degraded the EU to the international organization. Well, it's something that Washington has felt for a long time about Western Europe and the EU. These are their real emotions about those who lost their sovereignty, because the level of in the EU cannot be commented on. And just to there's no point to depict it, and our president said and warned Western Europeans that they're losing their sovereignty and even their own dignity. They behave like slaves towards their overseas, not even a brother, because Washington do not consider them as a relative, but to their overseas master. So they don't treat them as people. And the last question on in February 1945, there was a Yalta conference, and what's today's perspectives for the similar scenario in today's settlement? Sergei Lavrov wrote about it in his article of February 4. Is Rudolf with us?
Hopefully everything is good with you. I'm Niaz Mustafa, and I have two questions. My first question is related to Syria, which is we saw that last month a delegation from Russia went to Syria, and you had some discussions as well. My question is, there's news reports that Damascus officials asked Russia to hand them over Bashar Assad, the former president of Syria. Is it true that they have asked you this thing, or what do you have about this?
You know, information about the contents of the negotiations that took place in January in Damascus as part of the visit of our delegation to Damascus, led by Mikhail Bogdanov. This information was given in our message of January 29. To comment particular aspects of this context are not important in our view.
Okay. My second question is, are you supporting the decentralized government in Syria in a way that Kurdish and Druses have their own administration? And what do you have for the next government of Syria? How should it be?
Our stance in this regard is clear. We said it multiple times. We proceed from the fact that this concerns the internal policy of the country, and Syrians themselves should determine their own fate within their own internal dialogue, but they have to ensure interests of all ethnic and confessional groups, including Kurds, Druzes, and they also have to respect the fundamental principles of territorial integrity and sovereignty of Syria.
Thanks a lot. Have a nice day.
Спасибо вам тоже.
Good day to you too. Is the Caucasus newsletters with us? The Iranian ambassador to Russia announced that Russia and Azerbaijan and Iran will sign an agreement to build a railway. How does Russia evaluate perspectives to launch the western part of the transport corridor north-south? What questions are going to be discussed during the trilateral meeting? The development of the international transport corridor north-south was a central topic of negotiations between presidents of Russia and Iran in Moscow on January 17th. I think that you saw the text of the agreement that was signed at a high level about comprehensive strategic partnership between our countries. This issue was given special attention there. Our priority is to create a smooth railway logistics on the western part of the corridor. This will be possible after the part between the cities of Resht and Astara of 172 kilometers is built. The intergovernmental agreement providing export loan for these purposes was signed in Tehran on May 17, 2023. We note aspirations of all three countries of the intergovernmental agreement about the corridor to achieve these goals and to expand the potential of the corridor. This route was launched and operates. The flow is growing from year to year, and the full-scale building up of this route is an item in the agenda, and we want to create comfortable conditions for our suppliers. Is Anadolu with us? Yes. Good afternoon, Madam Zajárova. We have a question about the Middle East. Minister of Sport and Culture of Israel said that Israel won't let Hamas to retain control over Gaza, even if the deal on exchange of hostages is violated. What do you have to say about it in light on the start of the first phase on the ceasefire in Gaza? I recently talked about it while giving an answer to one of the previous questions. I have nothing to add. Every state has a government. Each government is formed differently in various countries. There are coalition governments, governments of one party. Various governments has ministers with other mandates and political views on internal and external political processes. We believe that our priority are the statements of the leadership of the country, as well as the leader of MFA of the country. In this case, we can talk about it in detail. It doesn't mean that other members of the government of other countries cannot or must not have their own point of views. No, but for us, signals and counterparts are the main source. Thank you. Is Almaydin with us?
Hello. I think you already answered my question already. Well, perfect. Thank you. Now, moving on then. Baku TV, please. Yes, I am here. Hello. Hello, Ms. Zahárova. We have only one question today. Heads of foreign ministries, transportation ministries and customs services of Russia and Azerbaijan will meet soon to discuss a rail link Russia-Stara of the international north-south transportation corridor. So the route is preliminary agreed several months ago. The foreign ministries of Russia and Iran discussed the Zanzibar corridor. Is there any progress in this area? Once we have information on that, we'll share it with you. As of now, I have no additional news for you. After E, please. Yes, hello. I would like to join the kind words of celebration on the Diplomats' Day. If you remember, I asked the question about European documents where they remove corruption with the different synonyms. Were you able to look into the question? Yes. I have looked at the statistics, figures, and phrases themselves, and it seems that new White House administration wants to address disparity in mutual trade with EU countries that actually has been to the EU's advantage. If we look at the 11th month of 2024, more than $180 billion, which is more than the similar period of 2023. For Americans, it is a proof that EU is trading with the US in not fair way, as Americans say, but Americans don't mention that the trade when you look at the trade and services, the situation is different, and the trade and services is to the US advantage. It is clear that additional restrictions on EU goods will have negative consequences for European manufacturers, but at the same time we see that the EU economy is struggling. There is a slow GDP growth. According to Eurostat 2024, it was 0.9%. The industrial production since 2023 is lowering. Well, the time will show how it's going to affect the EU countries and their economies, how it's going to affect the EU prosperity. But I believe that's not what Washington is interested in. Washington has a pragmatic approach. Their trade relations with the EU are not equal, and I believe you are talking about the use of different words, and they just have no time to use the proper wording. They just want to write what they think. But sometimes we believe that their ears are clogged with wax, and they have prohibited the majority of people to listen to and to understand. It is clear to everyone that EU interests are not going to be taken into account by Washington. Washington is not Russia that has always been advocating for equality and respect. Relations with Washington are different. They were trying to hide it, to disguise it, but now they are showing their true colors. And we see now that the European Union itself has been teaching Washington for years that's how Washington should work with the EU, actually. Probably there were times, and probably someone remember those times, when Russia and Western Europe could say Washington no, or could express their own interests, and now it's not even possible. I believe they're just sending checks there and explain what, and they specify the sums of money that should be paid. At the same time, the EU has been repeating as a mantra that they are autonomous from the political point of view, but at the same time they are acting together, that they have a mutual understanding, but in reality they have no strategic autonomy, they have no union, nothing. And it's not just a struggle, it's not a fight. The United States are just trying to get advantageous conditions for them. How are they doing that? What was beneficial for Russia and EU is blocked by the US, like resource base, energy resources, other competitive goods. Among other things, we see what Americans are doing with China on the European market by obstructing the imports of Chinese goods. They want to prevent the normal trading relationships between Europe and China. They won't allow it. There are so many examples to give. We believe that the EU is becoming increasingly dependent on the United States, but yet they prefer not to speak about it. The bilateral trade between Russia and the EU has decreased, and we reoriented our trade to friendly countries, and transatlantic trade wars pose no threat to our country. At the same time, uncontrollable use of tariffs and use of economic leverages to attain on geopolitical goals, ignoring the rules of international trade adopted by the WTO, as I've told you already and I have said many times, is fraught with high risks for the global economy. It will result into turbulent global markets, it will disrupt supply chains, it will disrupt countries, and the poorest countries will be affected the most, and the United States are not so interested in the prosperity of other countries, and in reality we're truly concerned by the Western policy that is bringing damage to the entire world. If the increased tariffs on European goods will help Europeans and the EU to realize that their anti-Russian policy was a mistake, which they've taken on due to the US pressure, will be ready to reconsider the need to continue working with European markets, taking into account our national interests and the history of working with the EU. And if you allow, I would like to draw your attention to the alarming information from Riga. There, military pensioners are not getting their pension payments anymore. Embassy of Russia in Riga is not picking up their phone, and they don't know what to do. Probably you could do something to alleviate their worries. Thank you. Thank you for your warning. Was it in Riga, you said? Yes, Riga, military pensioners, they haven't received their payments in January, and they don't know what to do. They can't call the embassy because the embassy is not picking up the phone. As for your question on terminology, because I was talking about the economic cooperation between the EU and the US, but as for the corruption terminology and its use in EU documents, I will go back to it later if you allow. Voice of the Fatherland, please. Hello, Ms. Zajárova. Can you see me? Yes, I can see you. There is an ambassador at large in the Russian Foreign Ministry that is responsible for covering war crimes committed by the Kiev regime, and that the ministry have an ambassador at large that will be responsible for covering war crimes committed by NATO and Western regimes. You know, in our departments we have special sections, like section of NATO, section related to the US policy. In the past, they were responsible for developing relations with our country, but due to the recent policy of both NATO and the United States, our relations have narrowed, have almost disappeared. They go through the process. They have went through the process of elimination, I should say. They are taking actions against our country. We have the relevant departments responsible for working with NATO and US. We're talking about war crimes committed by the Kiev regime because we're talking about acts of terrorism, murders, violent acts, cyber attacks. And we have highlighted what the Kiev regime has been doing by appointing Ambassador at Large, Mr. Miroshnik. And again, as for NATO and the United States, we have the relevant departments responsible for that. Sergei Naryshkin offered to discuss the issue of legitimacy of Ukrainian territories. What do you think about it? Well, if Mr. Naryshkin said it, well, it means that we need to discuss it. Are you ready to take part in the discussions? Is Russia interested? Are you interested in taking part in the workshop of restituting Russia within the borders of 1945? Earlier, you were interested in that. It was last year. Well, I think you can send an invitation, and we'll get your response. Who is going to take part in that event? Thank you. Embassy Live, please. Посольская жизнь. Hello, Ms. Zajárova. We have only one question. First, I would like to congratulate you and the Russian diplomats on their professional day. According to Olga Lyubimova, the Russian Ministry of Culture, it is important to develop cultural ties with the Islamic world. Kazan will host another summit, Kazan Forum, Russia's Islamic world. And for the first time, ministers of culture of the countries of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation will meet there in Kazan, and also some representatives were invited to the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, and there was a proposal to organize a large-scale exhibition on the history of the Islamic world in Russia. Olga Lyubimova also offered to organize several events related to that, and can we believe that the visit of representatives of countries of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation to Russia will be a political success for our country. We are supporting strengthening contacts with the countries of the global majority, and the Russian Foreign Ministry supports the idea to strengthen international cultural and humanitarian cooperation. The successful cooperation of the relevant projects and programs contributes to better understanding between peoples and societies of our countries. It helps to exchange views with regard to the global cultural agenda and global agenda in general. And as for the projects that you mentioned and developing cooperation, I believe that you need to speak to the organizers of the event. If organizers of the conference believe that they need any advisory support from the Russian Foreign Ministry, they can contact us. We'll be ready to help. Thank you. So, are we finished? Oh, you forgot about me. Yes, please, Virelk. Well, there is the phrase that the last one will be the first ones. Well, when was the time I asked you first at the briefing, or you believe that you always believe that you are the first journalist who will ask questions at my briefings? Well, surprise me with your questions then. The first question, Nikol Pashinyan, Prime Minister of Armenia in Washington, stated at the meeting with the Armenian community that the war in Nagorno-Karabakh helped Armenia to become independent. And many Armenian experts have seen that it was a hint that he hinted at Russia, because by saying so, Armenia has allegedly become independent from Russia. So what's your position on these remarks, on these words? I think you should send your questions to the office of Nikol Pashinyan and to him personally to understand what he meant by that, because I don't know what he meant by saying that. Second part of your question on genocide of Armenians, you know, to be true, I never expected then there would be another position to that issue as part of the official position of the Armenian government. I have never thought that this consolidated position that has been formulated for years will be changed, will be revised by the Armenian community. Well, you can hear the statements that have been made recently in Davos, but it's not the questions that should be raised, should be referred to us. Again, our position has been formulated in the statement made by the State Duma that we have been referring to and invoking for years. I don't know. I will express my personal point of view because I tried to fact-check the statements made in Davos. Our position has been formulated and it was changed. Thank you.
And the second question. Recently, one of the leading Azerbaijani TV channels published a report where they accused Russia, which supposedly in 1920 interfered in the territory of Azerbaijan and gave the region Zangezur to Armenia. And that Azerbaijani have not forgotten not only Zangezur, but given to Russia the historical territories of Azerbaijan. But at the end of January, he said that we will not forget it. So what is your opinion? How could you comment on words where both Azerbaijani authorities and the mass media represent historical points of view and prepare it's kind of an information war on this issue. You know, we've written many documents. We've spoken about it with our colleagues, partners, and friends. And the position is that the mass media, in all their freedom of action and with the lack of any censure, as a norm that is being promoted in our capitals, the mass media, considering the pain and the suffering that the people of this region have already experienced, they should act responsibly. They should work towards the peaceful resolution and towards the stabilizing the situation, not towards destabilizing. And I perfectly understand, and sometimes we also get criticized for the fact that Russian mass media are broadcasting or presenting their own point of view or the point of view of the experts who are not shared by one side or another. And we constantly call our mass media to take, when it comes to more sensitive issues that have a potential of a conflicting point of view. And it's not just a hypothetical issue, it's actually a real issue. And once again, I would like to reaffirm our position and our call towards this. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. If there are any other questions, please send them over. As you know, during the week we answer to your requests. Wish you all the best. And to all of my colleagues, I wish the upcoming holiday. And I know that my colleagues are already preparing this holiday when it comes to logistics and the information, but we'll have another chance to wish each other happy holiday. All the best and see you next time.